Awesome, Daniel. Thanks very much. It's good to see you again. And it's good to be back. And I get to do a fun thing right now that I don't ordinarily get to do. I get to plug somebody else. And so I'm going to start by plugging Michelle Bull, who's the other person on the screen here. Michelle is part of our team here at Skiff, and she is my partner in crime on the content side for the ethical stalking curriculum. So she is actually going to be presenting the FPDS Easy Search program next week. I get to be a spectator for once. So that's going to be fun, but just want you guys to know who you're going to be seeing when you come in for that next week. I'm going to plug Daniel and Veronica and the NBDC and the entire PTAX system. I've been supporting PTAX now across the country for a number of years. I always have a blast doing it. I love the people and the quality of what you guys are doing. So Daniel, thank you. Veronica, thank you for having me here. It's always wonderful, and I can't wait for my next trip to Omaha to hang out with you guys and at the little village of Axarvin and hang out and have some fun. So in the meantime, absolutely. So gang, thanks for stopping in today. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully this information will be very, very useful for you relative to the things that you are doing, starting to do, or already doing in the federal sector. This program, Do You Know Government Contracting? That's our name for the specific content series we provide in support of the fine print program for NBDC. It's all about giving you ground truth. Ground truth is a term used in the military and the intelligence community that represents knowledge acquired through being there. It's you were on the ground when something happened and acquired knowledge. And for myself and for Michelle, we have a lot of ground truth. We both have 34 years in this business. She started when she was 2, I was 14. And it's been a lot of fun working on both sides. Michelle was a govie as well as a contractor. I was always a contractor. So the information we're going to share with you today is all about understanding information that will help you see more clearly in the opportunity landscape, and whether it's identifying customers, competitors, partners, opportunities, all the above. This is the kind of information that will help you do that. The first time we presented a few weeks ago, we talked about another code, which was the agency ID codes. Make sure you check that out. They've got that recorded. It ties in nicely to this program. So having said that, I'll offer you this. So there's a term that's used in this business quite a bit, and that term is called connecting the dots. It's got big outside of the defense and intelligence community after 9/11, where folks were talking about this all the time. What I want to do is help you guys understand that the goal of this program and everything we do is to help you know where the dots are and what they mean so that you can connect them. So just wanted to share that with you. And one last thing before we formally get started into the program is this. So there's a few things that have happened over the last few months in government contracting that will have an impact on a number of companies and how they do business. These are 5 rule changes that are happening right now, or court cases that will impact how you do business, whether you're a small business or a large business, but especially small business. This really impacts you significantly. This information is from a website called Small GovCon. It's the blog of a law firm I think you guys know called Coprince Law. Stephen Coprince is the founding partner there. He's been a big supporter of PTAX for a number of years. Actually, he's who got me into the PTAX years ago. And so all this information you can find on Small GovCon. The URL is www.smallgovcon.com. It is a blog site for information. There's nothing being sold there at all. It is strictly great content that folks like you need to understand to help de-risk certain elements of government contracting. This first item I'm going to talk about is about a rule change regarding the rule of two. The rule of two is a determination by the US government that says when they are purchasing over a certain dollar amount, the simplified acquisition threshold, currently $250,000, that agencies have to apply the rule of two. It's an analysis of if they can expect to receive at least 2 offers from a small business. And if that happens, they then have to set that requirement aside. Well, prior to this court case, that rule was only applied after agencies went to an existing multiple award contract. The Court of Federal Claims says, no, that's incorrect. You have to put the rule of two first. The short story here is this change going into effect will put probably $30 to $40 billion back on the street, contestable for small business that previously for years has not been there based on agencies using the approach of going to the contract vehicle first and then to the rule of two. So make sure you check that one out. It is pretty important. If your company is currently in or considering going into the 8A business development program with SBA. So if you're already in the program as of March of last year, one of the things that happened as a result of the pandemic is that Congress extended the term for existing 8As by a year. This is an automatic extension for any company that was already in the program prior to March 20th of last year. So this is a game changer because there are some companies who had expired from the program because there's a 9-year limitation on it, and other companies facing that cliff too. This now gives them additional life. For companies that are owned by service-disabled veterans, the program of being an SDVOSB has caused some heartache and frustration for a lot of folks for a number of years. And the reason why is because there were 2 programs. There was one managed by SBA that was for everybody in government except VA. And then VA had its own program as well. But the more popular program was the VA program because of the certification you got that only mattered to VA. Well, that's changed. Congress has now blended the programs. SBA is now the authority, and they're in the process of transferring that authority and the program completely to SBA. So there would now be one program versus 2. Keep your eyes on this because there were disparities between the programs previously that they've got to iron out. And although the authority has been transferred, no money came with it. So SBA is trying to figure out how they're going to pay for this, hire the people, things like that. So it's on the books, but stay tuned. There'll be some more changes coming up. These last 2 are pretty big. So if you've ever worked for a prime contractor or a large prime, you might have experienced a lack of getting information from them to validate the work you did for them. They'll pay you, they'll give you more contracts, but they won't give you that big write-up that might help you go get more business elsewhere. It's kind of a way that some companies could hold you hostage. Congress has changed that. They now are requiring primes to provide past performance reviews to small subcontractors, and that agencies have to consider that past performance. This is a major game changer because it now gives you the ability as a small sub to really tout your expertise and go out there and start attacking other opportunities with some metal behind you versus just saying, well, we do this work, but I can't tell you about it. It's really awesome what we do. Now you're going to have documentation. So again, something to keep your eye on. The last one is this. If you've ever thought about I'll call it the enhanced type of partnering that you can do in a joint venture. I just saw recent awards coming out of Defense Intelligence Agency where a number of companies that we know entered into joint ventures and won part of a $12 billion contract. So joint ventures are a type of partnership between 2 entities, and your past performance and a JV previously stayed with the JV. That now changes in that if you do a JV, that experience can travel to the small business and they can use it as their past performance also. So there's a number of things happening to address the competitive status, the competitiveness of small companies, and these rule changes and others are part of that. So just wanted to present that to you. Hopefully this is good information. The URL again, www.smallgovcon, smallgovcon.com. Okay, gang, on with the show. So this program is all about unlocking the codes used during the contracting process. And these codes are important if you've ever been given the context to understand that they were important. I am pretty convinced that some of you that are on the line right now are going to hear this information for the first time. You're going to hear this information not for the first time, but for the first time in this particular context. And the objective is to give you this information in a way that you can use it. So, starting with that, the government uses a lot of different systems to, sorry about that, get this out of the way here, to track the things that they do. And those examples include programs and projects. There are designators, systems that they use to identify and track programs and projects underway in the US government. One of these designations is called a UII, a Unique Investment Identifier. If your company is involved in information technology and other disciplines, but primarily information technology, this is something you want to become familiar with. You want to understand where it's used, why it's used, what it means. It will help you see more business. The contract numbers, for those of you who have received contract awards from the US government, or if you've ever seen a solicitation ID on an upcoming opportunity, that number tells a story. You'll hear about that from Michelle next week when she talks about FPDS. That ID code is called a PIID, Procurement Instrument Identifier. When you think about folks that have a GSA schedule, there's technically two types of schedules. There's the GSA schedule, now the Consolidated Multiple Award Schedule, and then there's the schedule used by VA on delegation from a GSA, and that is the medical schedule. Anything that is medical, pharmaceutical, people, services, solutions, they come under the VA GSA schedule. And the code that they use to determine what you're selling on any of those schedules is called a SIN number, a special item number. Then there's the one that tracks contract actions by the type of goods and service being used. Those are the object class codes. A couple more here. When you think about how purchases or how purchased goods and services are going to be used, this one might surprise some of you. That's what's called a NAICS code. So the last one that we're going to be focusing on is this one. This is the one that actually identifies the goods and services that are going to be used. And so that is the product and service code. And I mentioned before, last week, we did a presentation that looked at organization IDs. It's the way you can identify a specific department, agency, or contracting or funding activity in the US government. Those are the DODACs and the AACs. But again, we're going to be focused on this one right now. This is all about understanding how to identify what a government agency is buying as it relates and aligns to your company's offering. So the product service code is the one that never gets the same limelight as NAICS codes. Main reason why, because the SBA size standards are associated with the NAICS codes. But NAICS codes aren't assigned based on the size standard. There's another rule that is used to determine how they're applied. So if you're doing market research and trying to understand who buys what you sell, trust me when I tell you, this is the code that you want to start tracking more closely. And here's why. So if you go to acquisition.gov, that is a government website that contains all information about how the government does acquisition. What you'll find is a manual there, and that manual basically provides the codes to describe the products and services and R&D being purchased by the US government. And in there, you'll also see additional information, and it'll tell you that these are the codes that indicate what was purchased for each contract action reported in the Federal Procurement Data System. And again, you're going to hear from Michelle next week. FPDS is the central repository that all government contract writing systems dial into to provide their information about the money they spent, over a certain period of time. Now, I said all agencies are required to report to the FPDS system, which is most of them, but not every single one. Now, here's the thing. Product and service codes aren't known that well, but the truth is they've been around since the 70s. Now, I started in the late 80s. And if you look at that last note there in parentheses, what you'll see is that NAICS codes came aboard in 1998. So the first 10 years of my career did not involve anyone using the word NAICS code in conversation or in practice. They simply didn't exist. Product service codes, however, did. To understand kind of the size and scope of these, product service codes, there's just simply more of them than there are NAICS codes. I'll give you an example. PSC codes come under 3 groups: products, services, research and development. Overall, there are 114 groups, either a letter or a 2-digit number that will describe a set of goods or services that can be procured. Those 114 groups for PSC codes as compared to 20 groups for NAICS codes. So the gist of it is the PSC codes are more granular and they better describe what companies do, and they do it better than a NAICS code can, which are much broader in definition. For those of you selling into the military directly, and if you're familiar with the term NSN, National Stock Numbers, also known as a NATO stock number, if you look at the first 4 digits of any of those NSNs, those first 4 digits, that's a PSC code. So essentially they're telling you this is the product that you're selling under this national stock number or NATO stock number. Now, where does this all come from? Well, you have to understand kind of the meaning and the basis behind these numbers, why they matter. So the US government has 2 primary acquisition initiatives that they're using today. One of them was the one started in 2010 called the Better Buying Power Initiative. This is DoD's primary way that they buy stuff. All right, and it's not just buying stuff. Acquisition is much larger than procurement. Procurement is an action that is how acquisitions move, how they happen when they need to get goods and services not already owned or provided inside of the government. So understand that acquisition is bigger than procurement. Well, here's the deal. Acquisition talks about design and concepts and development and obsolescence, all these things. It's the full life cycle of buying a aircraft carrier from design to blowing it up in the middle of the ocean to create a new coral reef. That's acquisition. Procurement's a small part of it. So when you understand that, what you understand is that DoD at the time when they created this, they were trying to simplify this, streamline how they do things to make it easier for them and for industry, but especially for them to be able to track and describe what's going on with budgets and so forth. So that's what the Better Buying Initiative is all about. The other one is category management. This is going to be another series we do with NBDC. We're going to talk about category management, which is a newer approach that the government is using, coming out of GSA primarily, not attached to the schedules necessarily. Schedules are part of category management, but category management is bigger than schedules. And the whole goal of it is creating more savings and value and efficiency for federal agencies, eliminating contract redundancies and meeting small business goals. Now, the reason I'm telling you about these is because what these two initiatives have in common is that there's a taxonomy that's been established so that agencies understand what is being purchased. And if you go to this tool, it's called the PSC selection tool. The URL is psctool.us, psctool.us. This is a website stood up by the Department of Defense, and it's effectively a wizard that allows them and us to go in and look at the different categories that they're buying from. IT, professional services, security, facilities, on down the list. And what they've done is they have identified what they're going to buy using the PSC code in all of these categories. If you're looking at it from the standpoint of category management, there are 19 categories, 10 that are government-wide, 9 especially for DoD. If you look at it from the standpoint of the better buying portfolio, again, there's 23 groups that they've created there that you're using to determine how they're going to buy, what they're going to buy when they buy facilities versus construction versus weapons. And so literally the government is telegraphing for you how they describe what they want to buy from you. And you can see this information. It's a public website. Jump in there, take a look around. Okay, you're going to get more of this with Michelle next week when she goes into FPDS, because you'll actually see these codes in action. It's kind of cool. So speaking of in action, so here's a quick view of what goes on when product service codes are used by the government in a contracting scenario. And so when you think about this, and when I show this to you, I want you to understand, that what you're seeing is kind of an extrapolation, a blow up of information that you can get access to right now. The system that I use to create this data is the one that Michelle's going to show you next week. So I can't, Michelle's killing me right now. She's like, stop saying my name, stop talking about me, because she's not, the flamboyant public speaker like I am, but she gets the job done. She's awesome and she knows her stuff. So here's the deal. If you were to go in right now to a system like Contract Opportunities, formerly known as Federal Business Opportunities, that's now located on beta.sam, or if you were to go into USA Spending or go into FPDS-NG, again, the system you're going to see next week, and were to do a search and a review of what happens when the agencies use a certain product service code or NAICS code, and what does that look like? Well, this is that view right now. So the NAICS code that I'm using is 541330. It represents engineering services. And I use this one because this NAICS code transcends so many industries. It's used in shipbuilding, construction, information technology, facilities management, you name it. I mean, literally, there's no place this is not used. It's used in agriculture. I mean, so across the board. So last fiscal year, when the US government referenced this NAICS code on a purchase, they obligated almost $40 billion. Now understand, there were over 1,200 NAICS codes referenced during the entire fiscal year that came to a total of $665 billion obligated by the government. So this one NAICS code represented $40 billion in spending. Now, here's the trick. If you were to go do this search right now on any of those tools and say, this NAICS code matches the kind of stuff my company does, and you did a search, well, you're looking at a $40 billion opportunity. Or are you? Because here's what comes next. Remember I told you that PSC codes come in 3 flavors: products, services, and research and development. Well, where there were 1,200 NAICS codes referenced last fiscal year, there were nearly 3,000 product service codes referenced last year, and they go on every transaction in FPDS. And so within this one NAICS code, there were 826 different PSC codes referenced. Now, again, I mentioned product service codes come in a lot of flavors, 3 of them. So when you look at this chart right now, the first 2 columns and then the top of the 3rd one, all those numbers represents a product group. So if you sell a good, then what you sell fits into at least one, but probably several of these groups. And there's going to be a 4-digit fully populated PSC code that represents what your company sells. If you sell services, you look at the lower half of the 3rd column. The letter A represents research and development. If you work in support of goods and services and solutions in that area, then you're going to have PSC codes that start with the letter A. If you do any of the other service disciplines listed B through Z, all of these are, again, followed by 3 other positions, three numbers for B through Z, or a 2nd letter and then 2 numbers for anything in the A column. But this is the 114 different groups of goods and services represented by PSC codes. And so when you think about that for a second, here's what it looked like. Those 826 PSC codes, which when I look at the NAICS code 541330 engineering services, I'm going to think they're going to be buying services, right? And I'm not going to be wrong, but I will be surprised because 158 of those codes were for goods. That came to 3.4 billion. So basically almost 10% of the spend was for products, and 158 of 826 codes were for products. Research and development came in almost another 10%, 157 codes representing research and development. Now here's the thing. So if 541330 is a NAICS code your company uses, what I'm showing you is when you do a search, either for new opportunities or historically using that number, you're seeing a lot more than what is relevant to you. All right, this is the point I'm making. So, $6.5 billion, over 300 codes, and who knows how many opportunities that represents had nothing to do with you if your core expertise was somewhere related to engineering services, because you probably don't do the R&D and probably aren't selling the goods. So what's left is this: 511 codes, $32.8 billion. Now, this would be great for you from an engineering services standpoint if all of those services in the 511 codes represented engineering services, but they didn't. Because now we dig into this. We look at what the government was buying by group. So I'm not going to show you the individual PSC codes. We tried that before, it worked, but this is more impactful. So again, if your company provides engineering services, electrical, mechanical, any of the above, think about that. If it's shipbuilding, construction, agricultural, makes no difference. It's engineering services, which makes it really interesting when the very first thing that comes up under engineering services is professional, administrative, and management support, 21 billion. That doesn't sound like engineering. I think of engineering as a lot more, specific than that. But this is the PSC code group translation for engineering services in part. So if you offer a professional service, an administrative service, or management support service, you need to go look at the group of R within the PSC codes to find the ones that represent what you do, because that's what your customer is going to call it. And again, to the tune of 21 billion. But then there's the architect and engineering one. Now it's engineering, but there are other ways that construction is bought, because I can tell you there's 3.7 billion might be an impressive number, but the US government spends a heck of a lot more than 3.7 billion, maybe 100-fold that number every year. Think about it, okay? So you're seeing only a piece of it. Then there's this maintenance, repair, rebuilding of equipment. That could be engineering too, facilities management, those kind of things. Then there's the research and development group. Again, I guess you could have engineering in there. I'm not really clear on what that is, but hey, it's what the customer said, right? Now, this last one, literally every time Michelle and I see it, it cracks me up, but it's the truth. It's there. It's what the government is telling you. Ships, small craft, pontoons, and floating docks. So these are the top 5 things. So again, I want you to think about this, because it doesn't just apply to engineering services. This is every NAICS code. So if you're looking at what you do from the perspective of a NAICS code, and then you peel back the onion the way we're doing right now, you'll find out how much more time and money you're spending to get to opportunities looking at it through that lens. We want to get you to reverse it like this. So let's say that the R group is representative of what kind of engineering services your company provides. And specifically, R425 is one code that stood out above all the rest. Well, just so you know, that number represented 13 billion of that 21 billion you see on the first line. So 13 billion of 21 billion went to this one code. And there are many codes under that group. And there were 511 service codes altogether. Guarantee there's at least 50 codes under R that chipped away that 21 billion. So here's the deal. So if I go back now and do the same thing I did with 541330 and look at R425 and say, what did Uncle Sam buy last year when they referenced this PSC code? Well, they spent a total of $28.2 billion. So it's only about 10 billion off, from the total spend under 541330. So in a sense, this one code, R425, accounts for more spending than the entire R group under 541330. What does that tell you? It tells me that there are other NAICS codes involved. In fact, 245 NAICS codes. So 244 additional NAICS codes accounted for spending that, had you been looking at 541330 alone, you never saw these other opportunities. Now, don't take this as my telling you that you want to track all 245. You don't, because you probably only want to track maybe 3 or 4 of them, maybe a dozen. But the real truth is you want to track the product service code, because it'll tell you everywhere it's being used, and you can determine which of those are relevant to you. And the choice you make is you can look at them from this perspective and see more relevant opportunities, or you can look at it from the NAICS code perspective and see a lot more irrelevant opportunities that just suck your time. So here's the point. I told you that NAICS codes come in 20 flavors. This is them right here. The first 2 digits of a NAICS code is what is known as the industry sector. And so that industry sector is what agencies are looking at to determine which industry do I need to bring in to do this work. Again, it's not what I'm going to buy, it's what industry. So 20 compared to 114, which one tells a better story based on what you're selling? And we maintain the PSC code is your friend from that market research standpoint. The other thing I'll add is this: if you're a small business or larger small business, and the NAICS code for your industry has a size standard that is still that far away from you, why are you worried about it? Because the only reason we look at them is to understand, are we small enough to be a small business for this opportunity? Well, if you know the size standard is 35 million and you're a $10 million company, you got a ways to go to think about it, okay? So don't worry about it. Focus on the one that actually tells you the truth. So here's the deal. So when I look at those 245 NAICS codes that were referenced when the US government referenced R425 as a PSC code, what were they buying? Okay, what was it that was being referenced, in solicitations? Well, the top 5 groups. Now, the one that I expect to see on top is the one that's on top. But the number of codes in there is what surprised me. So the first one I expected to see was under the 5.4 professional, scientific, and technical services. No surprise there for me whatsoever. But the number of codes in there that were not directly related to anything that sounds like engineering. I mean, the 541, family of IT codes, 541, 511, 12, 13, and 19, they're all in there. But then there's a bunch of other ones that don't sound like engineering to me, but they do sound like professional, administrative, and management support. See where I'm going? All right. Number 2, manufacturing. Number 3, information. Think cybersecurity. Number 4, administrative, support, waste management, and remediation services. Think civil engineering. And the last one, transportation and warehousing. So these are the top 5 industry sectors represented under the PSC code R425. So again, adjust your lens. Which way do you want to look at these? And make a choice and then commit to it. Here's the deal. Purchases referencing R425 were placed against every NAICS code group except one. Right there. That's the only NAICS code group that did not have any spending against it. So again, think about it. You hear all this stuff about NAICS codes, and you've got your favorite 8 or 14 on your profile, but there's money being spent across the board. They're running the table. And because you're not focused on them, because you've got your set NAICS codes, you never see those opportunities. All right, something to think about. Here's the other thing. If you go in to the what used to be FBO, which I like better, by the way, than the current one, have you ever thought about why it is that the product service code is above the NAICS code? Wait, you've never seen that before, right? So here's a product service code right here on a solicitation. They're there all the time. And it's above the NAICS code. Now, alphabetically speaking, that would be incorrect. So it's not in order that way. Well, my belief is the government is telling you what's more important to them. And they're telling you first what they're buying and then what industry that they want to have come do the work. It's the same thing if you go look at historical opportunities and take a look at FPDS. Again, you'll see this with Michelle. This is a snapshot from what is called the CAR, Contract Action Report. And if you look here at the top, again, you've got product service code, which PRO alphabetically would come after PRI. But in the system, it is above the NAICS code. Again, the government is telling you what's more important to them. Just putting it out there. So here's a use case for you, or maybe several use cases. If you learn to adapt the product service code to what it is you're trying to do in identifying customers, your target market, identifying opportunities, identifying competitors, all the above, they can help you do that. So when you think about market research in the term of asking questions, well, who buys what I sell? PSC code can help you answer that. Who orders or uses what I sell? That's a little thing between the funding office and the contracting office. PSC code can help you answer that. Which competitors or partners sell what I sell? It can help you answer that question. Which competitors or partners have contracts for what I sell? Again, asked and answered. How much is spent on what I sell? I just showed you that. And then how is what I sell purchased? Are they buying it on a purchase order, an IDIQ, a GSA schedule? What matters? You can see all of that using a PSC code on the system that Michelle's going to show you next week. And you can see this view based on either the buyer, that's the contracting office, or the customer, that's the funding office. All right, so folks, that's all I have for you today on contracting codes. Daniel, you want to come back up, sir? Is there anything, any questions we have from the audience?